that the American economy has become a horror show. Now, even though we've now passed through 61,000 deaths, charging towards 62,000 deaths, which is more than the total of the Vietnam War that was lost by the Americans. It's this economic pressure that we see by the slowdown that I suspect is forcing about 31 states here in America to roll the dice. They're rolling the dice with public health to get the economy going, because there's some expectations that even though growth is down by 4.8% in this quarter, there's some expectations that growth will be down by up to 30% in the next quarter, because this quarter hasn't taken into full effect the 30-plus million unemployed. Now, consumer spending, which has been driving this economy, is down 7.6%. Spending on services down 10.2%. Spending on hotels and restaurants down 30%. And spending on cars down 33.2%. Now, the Secretary of Commerce says, we're going to bounce back well by the end of the summer. President Trump says we're doing a spectacular job. His senior economic advisor says that he expects the snapback in the second half of the year to be enormous. But the Federal Reserve Chairman says the economy may need a bit more support from us if we expect us to recover that robustly. Now, meanwhile, finally, some good health news, which translated into a bounce on the stock exchange. The public face of the White House Coronavirus Task Force announced that there have been very promising trials on a new therapeutic drug for the coronavirus. Listen now to Dr. Anthony Fauci from the White House.
With 31% improvement doesn't seem like a knockout 100%. It is a very important proof of concept, because what it is proven is that a drug can block this virus.
Now, a drug that blocks the virus was enough to give the Dow Jones a kick. Now, this is a drug that was developed for the Ebola virus. We found that in patients, it's a randomized, double-blind trial that hasn't been peer-reviewed, but instead of taking 15 days to recover, it's taking 11 days to recover. Instead of 11% mortality rate, we're seeing 8%. So good public health news translating into a small bump in good financial news.
You know, Michael, amid all the health and economic horror stories that we are seeing at the moment, it's easy to forget that there is still a presidential election underway. So how is the president faring politically during this pandemic? I mean, there's been some serious bumps along the way. What was it? Just a week ago, we were talking about being injected with disinfectant, which may well be a low point.
Oh, one of so many. Injecting Dettol really punctuated it. I mean, I've seen some polls, even among
core Republicans, barely 25% of core Republicans believe a word that the president says about the coronavirus. So what we're seeing from a recent accumulation of polls, obviously we can't trust the polls. We saw that in 2016. But we can get a rough rule of thumb. This new accumulation of polls shows that the president's path back to the White House is definitely been more complicated by the pandemic. And we're seeing his path narrowing. And it's not the economy that this election will be fought on now. It will be the pandemic. Now, in the past, in times of national crisis, you see a presidential bump. It's called rally around the flag. Scott Morrison, I believe, has about a 68% approval rating. We see that with leaders in Europe, too. After 9/11, George W. Bush leapt to about 70%. Well, President Donald J. Trump, whose approval ratings have always been about 40, 41, 42%, leapt to a 49% approval and now has slid back to about 40, 41% approval. You know, this president did not win the election by the popular vote. He won it through the college, the Electoral College, and he won it in key battleground states. And polling there shows that his support is being significantly eroded. So much so that it's reported that he blew up at his own campaign manager on the phone and threatened to sue his own campaign manager. Let's take, for example, Florida, head-to-head. In Florida right now, according to polling, President Trump polls 43% against the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, 46%. In Michigan, President Trump polls 41% against the Democrats, Joe Biden, 49%. And in the other battleground states, these are all key. Pennsylvania, President Trump is polling 40% to Joe Biden's 50%. Look, what's embedded in all this polling and what's embedded in the election coming up is people's fear of the pandemic. 65% of Americans feel they're going to open too soon. 91% don't want to see any more sporting events. And while President Trump's daily briefings on the coronavirus that have lasted hours until he suggested injecting Dettol, it turns out, even according to hardcore Republicans, are working against the president and not for him. In a time of crisis, America wants a president, and it doesn't seem right now that it's getting it.